Hey, what's going on, fam? So, another quick video. This is going to be part two to my a rant about Jeremy Lin and anti-Asian racism versus anti-black racism. And the reason why I want to make a part two is because apparently that video attracted a lot of trolls and white supremacists and wannabe white supremacists um, to show up on my channel. So, I just want to address some of the things they said because like anybody who supports white supremacy, at the end of the day, they all use the same tactics, whether it's a wannabe Asian white supremacist, a wannabe white supremacist who's Asian or Hispanic or whatever it may be, or an actual white person white supremacist, or even a black person who's, a pro-white agent of white supremacy or pro-white supremacy. So all these people who are supporters of white supremacy, whether they're white or non-white, use the same tactics because white supremacy has long ran out of basically new tricks. Now, I guess you can say they do come up with new tricks because they find new ways to pull the same trick over and over. But at the end of the day, they don't really come up with a new trick in itself. They just maybe find new ways to go about pulling the same trick off. So I just want to use some of these talking points, these expected talking points that I got from these trolls who've never been on my channel, and just show black people how to respond to these kind of things and also how to be able to see that these people are not being genuine and that they are being racist. So what I want to do is read some of the comments that were on the part one of this video and basically reply to them or show black people how you reply and how you expose the type of talk that's been showing up on my channel. Because obviously, a lot of us we don't understand and don't know how to deal with racism. That's why we're um, still dealing with it. That's why we have black people that are willing to go along with this anti-black campaign that's being promoted by talking about how Asians are being targeted by black people. So obviously, a lot of us don't really understand and know how to deal with white supremacy and white supremacist guilt trips. So I'm going to use this video as a brief lesson or example of how to do so. So let's go ahead and read the comment that I'm going to use for the screen cap, but this is not the only comment. So somebody named John Smith shows up and says, "It's pretty telling to see black folks justifying racism against Asians because blacks have it worse. All I'm going to say is that when the time comes, we won't hesitate to protect ourselves. The LA riots were more than 25 years ago. We've learned to be better prepared and equipped since then." Now let's dissect this comment because this is a perfect example of the natural hypocrisy that comes when you're a white supremacist or a white supremacist supporter. So he starts off with fake moral outrage. He's, falsely positioning himself to have the moral high ground by starting his statement by saying, "It's telling to see black people justifying Asian racism because blacks have it worse." So basically, he's saying, me as the good guy who really supports morality, I find it quote unquote telling, and my moral highness allows me to look down on this telling fact that black people are justifying racism against Asians because blacks have it worse. So basically, he's taking this fake moral stance of, "Oh, I'm one of those who say all racism is bad, so I can see how, or I can. It's telling. It tells me something that I won't say what it's telling me. That's why I'm just using the word telling. It's quote unquote telling that black people don't have this same 'I'm against all racism' fake morality that I have." That's basically what that first sentence is meant to communicate. But then when he goes into his second sentence, it seems totally disconnected from his first sentence, but it's not. And let me explain what I mean. Because after he says that first sentence about black people justifying racism because blacks have it worse, then he immediately draws comparisons with the LA riots. And fam, for those of you who don't know, the LA riots were riots of black people rioting against or being upset about racism. So how are you equating people rioting with racism with people who are somehow ignoring racism or justifying racism, how are you comparing or equating the two? How are you comparing black people and the LA riots with Asians being so-called victims of racism? How are those two the same thing? Not only that, but how are you claiming to, obviously that's why it's quote unquote telling to see black people justifying, so-called justifying racism against Asians. So how are you the we will be prepared for the LA riots? Are you one of the racists and one of the white supremacists that black people were rebelling a bit against? The LA riots was not a black versus Asian war. So what is he why is he bringing that up? And why is he talking about we as opposed to the LA riots? So the people rioted against him? Is he one of the white supremacists that beat up Rodney King? What is he talking about? We will be better prepared. Oh, he's talking about we as in the white supremacists and our Asian allies. That's what he means. Or if he's an Asian, we as in the Asian wannabe white supremacists and our white allies. That's what he means, as in we. Otherwise, what are you talking about we in regards to the LA riots if you're the one who's against racism? If anything, you should be saying we as far as if you were participating in the LA riots. Not we as in we will be more prepared for the next time black people are upset about racism. So here he is without even realizing it, because white supremacists can't help but admit it. Because when you guys have conversations and debates with white supremacists regularly enough, you will realize that these kind of comments, these kind of weird, bizarre um, comments that don't really make sense, you'll get used to them. Because at the end of the day, the white supremacists are very angry and they really want to be racist. So they'll start off, especially when they're mad about you calling out racism, they'll start off with some fake moral outrage, some fake premise of, hey, I'm against all racism because that's the politically correct thing for any person to say. But then they'll go and proceed to admit that they're on the side of white supremacists. Like this dude. He started off by having fake moral outrage about people justifying racism. And then he proceeds to immediately place his side on the self of racists by saying, hey, we will be prepared next time you Negroes riot against racism. Why are we? Hey, you're not one of the racists, so how are you? Why do you need to be prepared and better equipped for riots against racism? Why are you talking about that, white supremacists? Or wannabe white supremacists? Why are you talking about how we will be better equipped next time people are upset about racism? Because that's what the LA riots was. Yet, seconds before, you pretended to have fake outrage over people being upset about people minimizing racism. So on one hand, you have fake outrage about people minimizing racism, but on the other hand, you make a racialized statement about us versus them and how we will be better prepared for you as black people. As if there's some kind of violent race war going on, because that's how the white supremacists think. That's why they're murdering us all the time, because they see it as a war. And they are wondering when we are going to fight back the way that they see it, or fight the war in the way that they see it, because that's why they're murdering us, because they see this as a literal war and they're waiting for us to exact the same violent mentality that they have towards us, and they're wondering why we don't have it. And that's why when white supremacists hear people like me talking real, they immediately resort to talking about violence and war and how we will be better prepared, because they know that if black people were smart and were courageous about what they do to us, that they know that a lot of the white supremacists would be under the ground right now, and they know that they deserve that. So anytime they hear a black person talking real, even if the black person makes no insinuations towards violence, they will start making insinuations towards violence and taking the conversation towards a discussion about violence, because they understand that intelligent black people like myself understand exactly how violent and depraved they are, and they understand what violent and depraved people like themselves deserve. So they go on ahead and take the conversation to that level. And again, fam, I just wanted to point out that comment to say, um, it's funny how, again, just now we see, or not just now, but again, how he on one hand takes the one side out of his mouth. He says, "Oh, I can." It's telling that you're not against racism, or that you're justifying racism, and then he immediately puts himself on the side of racists. Oh yeah, but us white supremacists will be more prepared next time you black people are upset about racism. That's why he brought up the LA riots, because that was just black people having riots over white supremacy, and over black cops beating up a black man, or white cops beating up a black man for no reason other than he's black. That's all the LA riots were about. So talking about we will be better prepared for the riots is basically him admitting to being a white supremacist, which is, again, fam, further proving that anti-black racists and white supremacists are the ones who are promoting this. And fam, I don't want to read all the comments because it's a bunch of repeats of the same type of comment. Because again, white supremacists don't have any new don't have any refined tactics or any new tactics. The only thing that they come up with that's quote unquote new is a new way to pull off the same tactic. So the white supremacists and wannabe white supremacist trolls that are showing up on my channel, they're all saying the same thing. So I'm only going to read. My apologies for the cough, fam. I'm only going to read one more comment, and then I'll be done. But so this is from some troll who's made multiple comments on the part one. I'm not going to pretend. This guy's named DB Cooper, and he says, I'm not going to pretend like I know more about your race to talk about it, and just the same, you know very little about Asian community that are made up of different ethnicities, or to talk about them or their plight. Still, I don't need to be Aboriginal Australian to know how they suffered, or to be Native American to know how they suffered, or to be black to know how they suffered. Just as I don't need to be Asian to know how they suffered and are suffering now in parts of Asia, Europe, etc. because of the pandemic. It's not called being woke. It's called empathy. It's called humanity, and it knows no race. You either have it or you don't. There's no gray area there. You look at what people are going through regardless, and either you see something wrong or there's something wrong with you. Either way, saying they haven't suffered enough, like the more people have to, or for others to take their call for help seriously, is just a sociopathic way to be human. So, fam, let me go ahead and dissect that, right, fam? Because if y'all heard all that babble and all that white supremacist trick bagging, at the end of the day, he's trying to say, oh, all racism is bad, and oh, you don't have to be the race to understand that the people have suffered, and oh, it's so horrible and evil to ever say that somebody, you're going to ignore somebody's racism because they haven't suffered enough and they need to suffer more and all that, blah, 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 right? And first of all, let me say this, because this is another common tactic of white supremacists, using straw man arguments. I never said that they deserve to suffer more, that the metric and the baseline is that you must suffer more in order for your anything that happens to you to be taken seriously. Nobody ever said that. Nobody ever said that was the metric of measurement. So again, this is the desperate white supremacists. They can't argue against what I actually said, so they have to make up something that I didn't say and argue against that. Nobody ever said that the metric for whether or not you should get justice is whether or not you've suffered enough in compared to somebody else. So again, that's just a bald-faced lie, like the white supremacists are naturally do. I mean, he's showing up to my channel, defending lies, defending Jeremy Lin's lies, defending these anti-Asian racism lies. So I shouldn't be surprised that he shows up and immediately starts lying on me. That's number one. But number two, and this goes for all the trolls that have showed up on my channel for that last video. Why are you just now showing up on my channel? My whole channel is dedicated to anti-black racism, or fighting against anti-black racism and white supremacy. So why haven't you been a supporter until just now? Why are you just now finding my channel for this topic, but you, the person who's so upset about all racism and has equal anger against all racism, why didn't you have that equal anger to show up on my channel when I was talking about anti-black racism? Now, there's a case for reparations for black people. There's stats that prove it. There's racial disparities specifically against black people. As a matter of fact, Asians are the most economically well-off race in America, even more than white people, whereas black people who have been here a lot longer than Asians are the most economically worse off. So surely you trolls support reparations, but I promise you, 90% of those trolls that are just now showing up to my channel do not support reparations for black Americans specifically, and black Americans only, because if they did, they would have been on my channel before this Jeremy Lin video. Fam, it's like this. It's like if me and a bunch of other people live in a neighborhood, right? And my house is being burglarized every week. And I'm sending out emails and calling for meetings. Hey, man, I'm being burglarized. We need to call a neighborhood watch. We need to do something about this. We all need to pitch in to make sure that none of us get burglarized. Not just me, but because I'm specifically being burglarized, I need some special attention and some special help right now to stop me, because I'm clearly the special target for burglary. And instead of my neighbors keeping an extra watch on my house when I have to go out to work or to the store, or actually having a neighborhood watch meeting with me, they kept finding excuses to not have the meeting. They kept saying, "Oh, I wasn't in the neighborhood didn't live here at the time when you got burglarized the first time, so I'm not obligated to do anything about the fact that I can see that you're still being burglarized to this day because I wasn't around for the first burglary." Even though the first burglary was done by somebody I'm related to and somebody I bought the house from, and that person used money they earned from burglarizing your house to upgrade their house that I currently live in. No, I don't have time for the meeting. What about other people's houses? Everybody has a problem. This person's roof has a leak. I'm sorry, we can't just pay attention to your burglary because everybody has roof leaks going on right now. They had every excuse to not prioritize the fact that my house was being burglarized. But as soon as someone else's house gets burglarized, not even burglarized, let's just say a burglar kicked in the door but then got scared off. Because a burglar kicked in somebody else's door, didn't even get to rob like they did me. They kicked in a neighbor's door. Now all of a sudden, they want to call neighborhood watch meetings. Everything has to stop. I need to come home early from work and come home to this neighborhood watch meeting and be one of the primary people showing top concern about the fact that this neighbor got burglarized. Yet, when I was begging for help for years, that I keep getting robbed every other damn day at this point. Nobody could help me. And then they say, "Oh, if you're not gonna go along with the fact that we're clearly showing 10 times more the care about this other person being a victim than you, then that makes you a bad person." That's basically what they're saying. That's basically what they're saying. Yeah, we know that you've been robbed 100 times. That's why all burglaries are bad. But we're only going to show care about it once a burglary happened to somebody else. That's not you. That's not black. Once somebody else in the neighborhood got robbed, now we can have time to have emergency meetings. And if you as a black person point out how we had no time for emergency meetings up until it happened to somebody that wasn't black, oh, that makes you horrible. Oh, how can somebody say we shouldn't care about burglary because they haven't been robbed enough? Oh, what a sociopathic way to think. Oh my God, how horrible. It's blatant hypocrisy, fam. And it's proven by the fact that these trolls have never shown up on my channel until now, because they are not against racism. are not equally against all racism. So since you're not equally against all racism, I'm not going to be equally against all racism, especially since my people experience the worst racism and we experience racism from all other groups of people, and no other group can say that. Not at the level of black people. That's why every ethnicity and every language has an anti-black, or even Africans have anti-black American slurs. But black people, African languages do not have slurs, or black American vernaculars do not have slurs that come from black people. Now, yes, we might have slurs that we use that come from the English language and white people, but we don't have specifically slurs that came from black people and black culture for every race. Really, any race, except maybe white people. We don't have slurs for any races that have come specifically from black people. Yet Indians have their own version of the N word. Hispanics do. Asians do. Middle Easterners do. Again, even Africans do with their Akata word. Everybody has a version of the N word because the whole world is anti-black. The whole world is not anti-Asian. And you can look at it in some of the economic stats in this country. And again, when I use the burglary example, it's not about the fact that somebody else needs to suffer more. It's about the fact that I'm not going to sit up here and ignore the fact that you blatantly ignored my needs. But as soon as the same thing happens to somebody else at a much lesser degree than it's been happening to me, all of a sudden you want us to pay attention to all burglaries, and all burglaries are bad. And if I dare mention the fact that you wouldn't help me when I was crying for help for years, or in the case of black people, decades and centuries we've been crying for help. When I point out the fact that you've been ignoring that, oh, what a sociopathic way to be. It's just convenient, fake moral outrage. That's all it is. It's convenient, fake moral outrage in order to be able to get away with lying on black people and practice anti-black racism by falsely calling us racist, because they know that being racist does not give them any kind of moral high ground and makes them demonic. So in order to sleep at night, they have to reverse it and make the victims the victimizer in order to justify victimizing them. That's why they're desperate to take, because fam, let me tell you what's happening, because these people will also show up screaming about, it's on video, it's on video. Fam, these were random crimes that could have happened to anybody. These were random crimes, and of course black people are in position to commit crime, because as I've talked about in other videos on my channel about anti-black racism, all of you trolls who are just now showing up on my channel, I also talk about how one of the side effects of anti-black racism is that it puts people in a position, and says this is shown by socioeconomic studies, to commit crimes in order to get resources because they're economically deprived. That's one of the effects of the anti-black racism that you hypocritical racists don't care about, but you're pretending to care about, because it gives you a chance to further promote anti-black racism by pretending that you're against all racism. Because if you were so much against all racism, you would have been on my damn channel when I was talking about things like how crime is risen when you economically deprive people, and socioeconomic studies show this. Centuries or decades of socioeconomic study proves this, and it has nothing to do with what race you are, except for the fact that black people, because of their race, are more targeted to be economically deprived. So yes, you had black people out here committing crimes because they're victims of anti-black racism and white supremacy. So they need economic resources, so they resort to crime, just like Irish people and Italian people did when they first came to this country, and they were considered non-white. So black people were resorting to normal crime, and they just so happen to have Asian victims, and the white supremacists are taking this as a way to claim that black people are being racist in order to justify being racist against black people, and doing harm to black people because you were scared that this black, again, setting up, like I said, an Asian George Zimmerman, where an Asian killed some black child, claiming that, oh, because of all the Asian people attacking, or all the black people attacking Asians, I was so scared, and that's why I killed this black child. That's all they're setting up for. That, and just being justifying racism against black people in general because so-called black people are racist against Asians, so somehow being racist against us is now justified. That's all that is, and to take the focus off the fact that black people are still suffering under racism. For example, fam, did y'all know in Texas they're arresting and murdering black people while during all this power outage and stuff? You guys know that story where the black child was walking home from work when there was no power and it was freezing, and these cops stopped him and had no justification. Then they claimed that they stopped him for jaywalking when he was walking home from work in his Walmart uniform when it's freezing, and there's basically a damn national emergency or natural disaster going on in freaking Texas, and you're targeting black children at that time. See, that's the type of stuff and remember, Trump, Orange Man, the source of all racism, is out of office, so they can't focus on him or blame him for stuff like that anymore. Or there was some other black child who was thrown in jail unjustly during this freeze out in Texas, and he died. So because they can't blame Trump or use him to distract from racism or make him the source of all racism, now all of a sudden within a month of Trump being out of office, now all of a sudden these random crimes that have nothing to do with Asians being targeted because they're Asian, all of a sudden black people are now, we went from Trump being the source of all racism, within a month black people are now the source of racism. See what happens when you idiot ass black people vote for Democrats? Because they ain't going to point out how Joe Biden ain't doing nothing about these racists down in Texas who are targeting black people during one of the worst times and one of the last times during one of the times when being a racist should be one of the last things on your fucking mind. That should be one of the last damn things on your mind. Yet that's on the forefront of the white supremacists in Texas' mind. And people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ain't doing shit about it. And that's why they're coming up with these distraction tactics. And again, family, for these damn trolls, for these pro-white supremacist trolls, again, why are you just now showing up on my damn channel, troll? If you so much cared about racism when my whole channel is dedicated to racism. You just now found my channel. But we all know the deal, fam. So I'm not one of these dumb black people that you white supremacists can come and gaslight. So don't even try it. Give it up. Don't try it. Don't come over here. It's not worth it. But anyway, fam, that's it. Another long rant. Like, share, subscribe. That's another video. And peace.